Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we take your sources and really zero in on the essential insights.
Hey there.
So today we're jumping into the very beginning of the research journey.
Yeah, the starting line.
We're pulling directly from Chapter 2 of Research Methods for the Behavioral Sciences, the 6th edition.
A classic text.
And forget trying to, invent the wheel. This deep dive is all about understanding how researchers find that initial spark.
Right, that first idea.
Yeah.
And maybe more importantly, how they frame it so it's something you can actually study.
Exactly. It's like the book uses this great analogy. Research is like entering a conversation that's already going on.
Yeah, really busy room maybe. You don't just shout.
No. You listen first. You figure out what people are talking about, what the main points are.
And, crucially, what hasn't been said yet. Or maybe what needs a closer look.
Yeah.
That's your opening.
That's the core idea. Finding your spot in that ongoing scientific conversation.
So our mission today, really, is to walk you through that. Where do ideas come from?
How do you figure out what we already know? And then how do you shape that raw idea into a specific, testable question?
What we call a hypothesis. It's basically the blueprint.
The foundation for, well, pretty much every study you'll ever come across.
Okay, so let's kick things off right at the beginning. Step 1, Part 1, identifying a general topic area, something that interests you.
And the book makes a great point here. Ideas are literally everywhere. You just need to look with curiosity.
Absolutely. No lightning bolt needed, usually.
Yeah.
Just start with what you're already wondering about. Personal interests are huge.
Like something from a class, or a behavior you see, or an issue you care about.
Yeah, any of those. Or even just, casual observation, watching people, animals, everyday stuff.
Those little, why'd they do that moments.
Exactly. They can genuinely spark a real research question, even looking at your own habits.
And it doesn't have to be firsthand observation either, right? The source mentions reports from others.
Right. News stories, findings from other research papers, even stuff in novels or TV shows.
But there's a big warning label on that one.
Oh, definitely. Non-scientific sources.
Yeah.
They might give you an idea, sure, but you have to check the facts critically. Verify it scientifically.
Good point. And then there are practical problems, things that just need fixing.
Super fertile ground. Stuff from daily life, your job, school.
Like that car audio control example in the book, making them less annoying isn't just convenience.
No, it's a real problem rooted in, like, human factors, attention spans, cognitive load, all that.
Which neatly brings us to a key distinction the book makes. Applied versus basic research.
Yeah, this is important. Applied research aims to solve a specific practical problem.
Like, does reducing class size from 30 to 25 actually improve test scores?
Yeah.
Very practical question.
Whereas basic research is more about pure curiosity, understanding something just to understand it, testing a theory.
Why do we forget things? What's the nature of that kind of thing? Knowledge for its own sake.
Right. No immediate practical application necessarily in mind.
But they often connect, don't they?
Oh, totally. Basic findings can suddenly become super useful practically. And tackling an applied problem might show where our basic theories are, well, lacking.
So they feed each other. It's not really an either-or situation.
Not at all. The main thing for this first stage is just pick something you genuinely want to explore more. Don't stress about narrowing it down perfectly yet.
Just find an area, a population, maybe a behavior that catches your interest.
Okay, so you've got that general area. Now what?
Now comes the second part of step 1, and it's crucial, diving into the existing research literature.
Right, this is where you actually listen to that conversation we talked about, your listening tour.
And the book says there are 2 main goals here. First, just get up to speed, what's already known.
General knowledge, yeah. What's current in your chosen area?
And second, and this is key, find the gaps, find the unanswered questions.
That's where you come in. That's where your potential study fits. It's finding where the conversation needs a new voice.
So it's often less about inventing something totally new.
And more about finding the logical next question based on what's already been done. Often the researchers themselves point the way.
They'll literally say, future research should look at.
Exactly, right there in the paper. So the literature, that's just the term for all this published stuff, right? Journals, books.
Yeah, the whole body of published work in behavioral sciences. And you need a way to navigate it.
Which means databases, online databases.
Your best friend in this process, they let you sift through, well, mountains of publications using keywords, authors, subjects.
And I usually give you that critical little summary, the abstract.
The abstract, so important, your first filter.
Definitely. Gives you the quick version. Why they did it, what they found, what they think it means. Helps you decide fast if it's relevant.
Now, the book makes a really practical point about different types of databases. Full text versus not full text.
Yeah, that's super important for searching efficiently. A full text one, like PsycARTICLES, gives you the whole paper right there. Convenient. But a database like PsycINFO, which is often not full text, indexes way more journals. Its coverage is much broader.
Ah, okay, so you might have to do an extra step to get the article.
Right. Track down the PDF through your library or whatever. But searching that broader index massively increases your odds of finding that one key study you might otherwise miss.
So wider net, more potential finds, even if it's slightly less convenient.
Exactly. You trade immediate access for better discovery potential.
And that also touches on quality, right? Searching PsycINFO versus just like Googling.
Big difference. Professional databases mostly contain peer-reviewed work. There's a quality control layer built in.
Google Scholar gets a mention as being pretty good, though.
It does. It's better than a general web search for finding scholarly stuff for sure. But specialized databases are generally the go-to.
Okay, so you run your search, maybe in a broad database. You're going to get a lot of hits. How do you screen them efficiently?
You need a system. The book suggests layers. Start with the title. You can probably toss out like 90% just based on the title.
Okay. If the title looks interesting,
Read the abstract. That's filter number 2. If it still seems relevant.
then you get the full article. But don't read the whole thing yet.
Not necessarily. Skim the introduction first, get the background and hypothesis, then skim the discussion, see their main conclusions and future directions.
Only then, if it really seems relevant after skimming those key sections, do you dive in and read it carefully.
Right. And don't forget the reference list in the articles you do find useful. That's a treasure map.
How so?
It leads you backwards to foundational studies and sideways to related work by other authors. It helps you trace the whole conversation.
The book uses that tree metaphor, right? Getting to the newest leaves, but also understanding the trunk and main branches.
That's a great way to think about it. You need both the latest stuff and the core studies.
So when can you finally stop searching? Is there a magic number?
No, definitely no magic number. The source is practical. You stop when you feel you've got a good handle on the current knowledge in your specific narrow area.
And crucially, you've found a clear, unanswered question, a gap.
Exactly. And the articles you found need to provide the justification for why your proposed study is actually needed, why it's the next logical step.
Okay, that makes sense. Which leads us right into the final part of step 1. Using those articles you found to actually pin down your specific research idea.
Right. How do you get from, okay, I've read stuff, to, here's my question.
One way is just look for the suggestions the authors made.
Easiest way sometimes. They often literally spell out ideas for future research near the end of the discussion section. Limitations they faced, questions their study raised.
They're practically handing you ideas on a plate.
Pretty much. Another cool technique is combining or contrasting findings from different studies.
Like the chocolate and Nobel laureates example. That was wild.
Totally. Someone knew about cocoa improving cognition. Someone else had data on chocolate consumption. Put them together, spark an idea. Any link to Nobel Prizes per country. It shows creative connections are possible.
We're looking at studies that disagree.
Yes. If 2 studies on seemingly the same topic get different results, don't just ignore it. That conflict is the research idea. Figure out why they differ. What variable might explain it?
To do that well, you need to read critically, understand the parts of the paper.
Exactly. The source breaks down the typical APA sections. Introduction, background, hypothesis, prediction, ask. Is the lit review solid? Does the hypothesis make sense based on it?
Methods section. Participants, procedures. This seems like prime real estate for new ideas.
Oh, absolutely. Could you run the same basic study with older people? Younger people, different culture? Could you measure the outcome differently? Use a slightly different task?
Modifying the method is a really common way to develop a new study, isn't it?
Very common. Just make sure the modification is theoretically meaningful, not just random.
Then results, lots of stats.
Yeah, crucial for judging their study. But the source rightly says it's usually not where you generate your next idea. You're checking their work, not brainstorming here.
But the discussion section, that's gold again.
Total gold. Summary, interpretation, implications, limitations, future directions. All there. Ask. Do the results really support their conclusions? Are there other explanations? How far can we generalize these findings?
And those limitations they mention might be the very thing your study aims to fix.
Precisely. And don't skip the references list. It's your map, remember. Plus, the book stresses taking meticulous notes. Full citation details for everything. Author, year, title, source, DOI.
Avoids plagiarism nightmares later.
And helps you build the introduction for your own paper. You need those sources organized.
So questioning every single part of a study you read, why these people, why this task, why this conclusion, that process itself can spark your idea.
It really can. It shows how research isn't static. It's this dynamic, growing thing. New ideas come from seeing the direction it's already moving.
Okay, so you've done the reading, you've spotted a gap, you have a general idea. Now what? Step 2.
Step 2. Take that general research idea, that statement or question of variables, and turn it into a formal hypothesis.
Define hypothesis for us again in this context.
It's basically a tentative answer to your research question, a specific prediction about the nature of the relationship you expect to find between your variables.
And this prediction is what your study will actually test.
Exactly. It's the foundation. And it needs to have certain qualities to be a good scientific hypothesis. 4 main ones, according to the source.
Okay, lay 'em on us first.
First, it has to be logical. It needs to follow logically from previous theory or research, not just a wild guess.
Like the self-esteem example. Premise 1, academic success is valued. Premise 2, being valued boosts self-esteem, therefore.
Hypothesis. Higher academic success relates to higher self-esteem. It's a logical deduction. This provides justification and connects your study to what's already known.
Makes sense. Second characteristic.
It must be testable. Everything in your hypothesis, the variables, the events, the people, has to be something you can actually observe and measure in the real world.
So no what-if scenarios about history because you can't observe alternate timelines.
Exactly. It has to involve real situations, real measurements.
Third, this one sounds important.
Crucial. It must be refutable or falsifiable. It must be possible for your study results to show that your hypothesis is wrong.
So if you hypothesize therapy X will decrease depression, it has to be possible for the study to find that it doesn't decrease depression or even increases it.
Precisely. If a claim is set up so it can never be proven false, like, my magic powers only work when no one is testing them, that's not scientific.
Or things you just can't measure, like good vibes or something.
Right. Or moral judgments. Science needs that possibility of being proven wrong through objective evidence.
Okay. Logical, testable, refutable. What's the fourth?
Fourth, and this one trips people up sometimes, it must be positive. It needs to state the existence of something.
Existence of a relationship.
Yeah.
Or a difference, or an effect.
Yes. You hypothesize that there is a relationship between A and B, or that group 1 is different from group 2, or that treatment X does have an effect.
You generally don't hypothesize the negative, like there is no relationship.
Generally, no. And the reason is tied to how science works, kind of like a jury. The default assumption is not guilty, or in research terms, no effect or no relationship exists.
Until proven otherwise.
Exactly. Your job as the researcher is to gather enough evidence to reject that default assumption and demonstrate that something does exist. Failing to find evidence for a relationship doesn't prove it doesn't exist.
It just means you didn't find evidence that it does exist in your particular study.
You got it.
Yeah.
So you always frame your hypothesis positively, aiming to find evidence for something.
Okay. Logical, testable, refutable, positive. That's our good hypothesis.
That's the goal. And once you have that solid hypothesis, you move into the later steps designing the specifics of your study.
Which this chapter mentions but doesn't cover in detail, right? Defining variables, choosing participants, procedures.
Right, that's for later chapters.
Right.
But you take that general hypothesis like visual imagery improves memory.
And turn it into a specific prediction. Like, college students using imagery will recall more words than students not using it.
Or you could test the same hypothesis but differently. 10-year-olds shown pictures will remember more story details than those just hearing the words. Same core hypothesis, different specific test.
And the book notes that even that process, taking an existing hypothesis and testing it in a new way, with new people or methods, is another valid way to come up with a new study.
Absolutely. It keeps the cycle going.
So, wow, that's quite the journey. From just being curious about something
to digging into the literature, really listening to that scientific conversation.
Finding a specific gap, a question that needs an answer.
And then crafting that answer as a clear, logical, testable, refutable, positive hypothesis.
It really is the absolute foundation for all the research that follows. Every single study starts right here.
Every single one, no exceptions.
So here's something for you, the listener, to chew on. The next time you read about a study, any study,
in a textbook, online, wherever,
think back to these steps. That research didn't just spring into existence. someone went through this process.
Ask yourself, what was the initial spark? What conversation was it joining? What specific question? What hypothesis was it trying to test?
And maybe even think, how could you potentially extend that particular conversation, knowing what you know now?
Where might the next logical step be?
That's your challenge. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into finding research ideas and crafting hypotheses.